Hello, students. All right. Today's video is a correction video for our first in the wild exercise. Now, whenever we have a learning quiz, I will be posting one of these correction videos. Remember that the purpose of the learning quiz is to assist you in working through something. For some of you, some learning quizzes might be very straightforward and easy. For others, the learning quizzes might be addressing issues that you might be carrying forward from earlier in your educational career. So since I don't know offhand where any of you are, in terms of your learning process, the learning quizzes as well as the homeworks are a chance for me to really be able to address individually issues that you might be having. So today's learning quiz, I'm going to get to right now. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Okay, so here is our in the wild. Now, one of the reasons that I call these in the wild is because every example I have actually comes from student homework. That's one of the reasons why I love my in the wild quizzes, because these sentences are they're really from student homework. Students turn these in. And so these are issues that are real. They are really things that a lot of my students are dealing with. Sentence fragmentation, grammar construction, lots and lots and lots of issues. And they're constructed in a way that if I had made an example just out of my own head, it would never be broken in the way that a real student example is. So when you are working with grammar correction, either your own or in one of these quizzes, the best thing to do is to start by reading each sentence out loud. The reason for this is because your ear, assuming you are a native English speaker, and if you're ESL, this might be backwards for you. But if you are a native English speaker, that is, you grew up speaking English, you learned English from your parents or in school, then your ear has about 6 to 7 years more experience with the language than your eye does. Think about how you learned the language. You learned it by hearing. You learned by listening to the rhythms of speech around you, how people constructed speech around you. That's why that's why your ear is just stronger at figuring out when something is wrong. And you don't have to know a lot. What I'm really going to focus on in terms of our grammar exercises, I'm not going to be worried about, can you identify split participle? Are you going to be going through and listing, all the ways you can fix something? That's actually not my interest. My interest is, can you hear that something is wrong? Does it sound off to you? Is it not right when you say it out loud? Because it's just going to be easier to catch those things with your ear than with your eye, particularly when we're dealing with something that is online, because your eye is exceptionally good at skimming over things quickly, especially on screens, and just filling in what should be there to give you comprehension. But that's not always necessarily the best way to grammar check something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this out loud. And when I read something out loud, or when you are reading something out loud, the important thing to do is read it exactly as it appears in front of you. Pause at a comma or a period. Commas and periods are signal to the reader, to pause or stop. So I'm going to read it exactly as it has been written. So here's our first sentence. Juliana, mother, is mother racist than her son Julian. There are several instances where she displays that she is. Some reason she is more racist than her son is that she is proud of her family lineage, racist roots, and slave owning. So we have a very problematic first example. So I'm going to start going through it. Now, the first, things that we should do is just, let's just go, get our low hanging fruit first. So Juliana, we're talking about Julian. If we say Julian mother, what this person means is Julian's mother. So apostrophe S. Julian's mother is mother racist than her son. Well, we know that the person actually probably meant to write more racist. Julian's mother is more racist than her son Julian. I want a comma there because we're talking about her son, comma, Julian. Also, do I need both? Do I need to remind you that if I'm saying Julian's mother, I'm pretty sure we know the name of her son, which is Julian. So I'm going to cut this out because I never like, saying something twice when I could just say it once. So we've simplified that a little. Julian's mother is more racist than her son. What was the real point of the sentence? There are several instances where she displays that she is, some reasons that she is more. Listen to what's going on. This is repetition, isn't it? There are several instances where she displays that she is. Some reasons she is more racist than her son. All of this is just repetition. And all of this, and I mean all of this, all right? I'm going to go all the way. I can replace all of this with one word and end up with a stronger sentence. Julian's mother is more racist than her son because she is. And now I've actually linked my statement. Now I have an interpretive statement where saying she is this, she is racist, more racist than her son because, and now I'm leading to my reasons. Okay, now I have, her family lineage, comma, racist roots, and slave owning. Whenever we have a list of items, more than two, you're going to use the Oxford comma. That simply means you're going to have a comma after each, item other than the last one. Julian's mother is more racist than her son because she is proud of her family lineage, racist roots, and slave owning. Now, slave owning is, again, that's probably part of that family, and history of having slaves. This back end could honestly be clarified and rephrased, and that's part of what you can do as a correction. But what we've done here is we've corrected most of the major issues, right? Julian's mother is more racist than her son because she is proud of her family lineage, racist roots, and slave owning. This is, I would accept and give full points for this adjusted sentence because you've eliminated the just repetition and you've made a more clear sentence, and you're keeping to the writer's original intention. You don't, whenever I give you an in the wild, part of your job is also to figure out what was this person trying to say, because that's a lot of what I do when I read your homework and essays. I'm saying, what are you trying to get across to me? Remember that the point of grammar is not to be overly fussy, though yes, I am probably overly fussy. The point of grammar is to convey information correctly. That's one of the main things we're focusing on. We're focusing on usage of language and we're focusing on clarity. So there's number one for you. So if you are, for example, revising your first quiz, if you got anything less than the full 25 points on your first question, if you submit that kind of sentence to me in your redo, congratulations, you're going to get the 25 points. Isn't it great to do these correctional videos? All right, let's look down to number 2. Choosing to sit next to a black man on the bus is barely penance for his mother's and family's crimes against blacks. Okay, let's start with our basic grammar first. Okay, did you hear where that broke where it shouldn't have broken? Choosing to sit next to a black man on the bus is barely penance for his mother's and family's crimes against blacks. Why am I pausing there? There's no reason for me to pause there. That comma shouldn't be there. Always remember, if you put a comma somewhere, it's because you want me to pause. I shouldn't. Choosing to sit next to a black man on the bus is barely penance. Now I'm actually going correctly through the sentence. Okay. Other question. How many mothers are we talking about Julian? This is a plural word. This is not possessive. This is plural. In order to make this word plural, if we're talking about Julian's mom, I'm going to have to add an apostrophe right there. Similarly, how many families are we talking about when we are talking about Julian? We're talking about a single family. So we're going to make that singular apostrophe S. Mothers and families, crimes against blacks. Okay. Now, this is extremely passive construction. I prefer active construction. Choosing to sit next to a black man on the bus. Who is choosing? Julian. I would rather you start with something active. Julian's choice to, now we're going to, Julian's choice to sit next to the black man on the bus. I'd rather always try and start with, who are you talking about? What's going on? Be active in your construction. Julian's choice to sit next to a black man on the bus is barely penance. It's an interesting word. I love penance as a word. I don't think it fits what the person's trying to talk about. So is barely penance, I'd rather see that rephrased. Penance is essentially atonement. It's, choosing to atone for a crime, to make up for something that was done. I'd rather you, use language that you are comfortable with. Is penance the word that you're comfortable with? Or doesn't make up for his mother's and family's crimes against blacks. Use the word that comes to you, or use the language that comes to you naturally. If penance was what came to you naturally, great, use penance. Otherwise, you can rephrase. Okay, so there's number 2. All right, number 3. And guys, if you have questions about how I'm doing these things and what's going on here, you can post it in class, the course questions discussion board. Here's a really fun one. Number 3. Being brought up in the era, she was bombarded with twisted beliefs. She had no outlets to steer her in the right directions, nor did she have positive, progressive people around her when she was growing up. All right. First of all, this is very fragmented. You can hear that just what I'm saying. Do you hear how jerky these sentences sound? They're like little, being brought up in the era. Who? Who's being brought up in the era? She was bombarded with twisted beliefs. And then we've got a really long sentence at the end that doesn't exactly need to be long. So what we really, this isn't a comma issue. This is all a fragment problem. And a lot of times when you have fragmentation problems in sentences, it simply means that the other half of the sentence, or sometimes the other 2 halves of the sentence, are just scattered elsewhere. So look around it. So first of all, being brought up in the era, I want to hear, okay, who is being brought up in the era? Because Julian's mother was, was brought up in the era. She was bombarded with twisted beliefs. Again, look around and say, all right, okay, when she was growing up, I'd rather say, Julian's mother was brought up in the era. I've got some other information around here when we're talking about growing up. So Julian's mother was, got that growing up, was bombarded with twisted beliefs. Look at that, when she was growing up. I'm going to move that over here. Okay. See, Julian's mother was bombarded with twisted beliefs when she was growing up. I can also say, in the era, when she, if we really need that, but in the era is so very vague. I mean, what era are we talking about? I'd rather just say Julian's mother was bombarded with twisted beliefs when she was growing up. That actually kind of really gets me to what I'm talking about. We're talking about how she was formed. She was talking about how she was brought up. Julian's mother was bombarded with twisted beliefs when she was growing up. And she had no outlets to steer her in the right directions, nor did she have positive, progressive people around her. Are we talking about the same thing now? No outlets to steer her in the right directions, nor did she have positive, progressive people around her. Again, to steer her in the right directions. She had no positive people to steer her in the right directions. there are a lot of ways we can rephrase this. This is not the only way to fix this sentence by any stretch of the imagination. There are probably as many fixes for a sentence like this as there are people, simply because a lot of this is preference. How would you rearrange this? What would you trim out when it comes to just the sheer repetition of this? You don't have to get it down to a single sentence, though, as you can see, my inclination does tend to be, can I get this down to one clear sentence? Because none of these examples were using, references to text in a large way. They weren't explaining. They were simply, these were just interpretive statements. These are the statements that then should start me on a path where then I start explaining, offering examples, proving to a reader something. Okay. Julian's mother was bombarded with twisted beliefs when she was growing up, and she had no positive people to steer her in the right directions. Better? Well, it's certainly better than what we started with. So think about that kind of thing. This is what we're going to be working with a lot in the wilds. We're going to be trying to eliminate repetition. We're going to be trying to make clear statements, and preferably we're just going to be, in a lot of cases, removing junk, because a lot of times what tends to be filler in paragraphs or things like that is just junk, and I'd rather strip it down to the original. And people say, well, then how will I meet my page deadlines? You want me to touch page 3 for all these homeworks? Well, bringing it back, taking junk out and stripping it down to clear interpretive statements is your starting point. Your next step, though, is to explain, expand, support. And that's where, for the 90% of people, their length problems are coming, because they're just making factual statements. They're not making interpretive statements, and they're not supporting and improving those interpretive statements. That's where true length comes from. It doesn't come from, well, can I state this thing another way? Can I rephrase? Can I give more? Can I add more words? That's not, you need to give me argument. Okay. And number 4, our last one for today, here's a good one. Julian, on the other hand, is also racist. It seems as though he uses Black people as a way to get to his mother. This is a perfect example of 2 sentences that really should be, in one sentence, because the other half of this is, over here. So first of all, Julian, on the other hand, is also racist. I need some commas here because I need to be able to pause. So right here, comma, comma. On the other hand is what we call a parenthetical statement, in that, can this sentence exist without it? Absolutely. Julian is also racist. There we go. It doesn't need this at all. I could cut it out entirely. I'm leaving it in here because parenthetical statements certainly have their place. They can help with rhythm. They can help with the small things. So this is just how you introduce a parenthetical statement. You have commas on either side to show that how I read it is, Julian, on the other hand, is also racist. That's how it is constructed. So I've got that. That helps over here. It seems as though he uses Black people as a way to get to his mother. That's a very, kind of sentence right there. It seems as though you're distancing yourself from this. No, I'm not interested in that at all. That's weak writing over here. Instead, what I'd rather see, instead of this, first of all, he uses Black people as a way to get to his mother. That is going to be someone's argument for why he's racist. Remember? So instead of it seems as though, that's weak writing. Cut it. And we're going to replace it with because. Julian, on the other hand, is also racist because he uses Black people as a way to get to his mother. Here we go. Now we're doing better. Much, much better. All right, look at what I have now. Julian, on the other hand, is also racist because he uses Black people as a way to get to his mother. Fantastic. That's a good interpretive statement. That's a nice sentence to start a paragraph with. You would then give me examples of how is he using Black people to get to his mother. You'd explain to me why what he's doing is racist. You'd explain to me why that is harmful, why that is bad. That is where your paragraph would go. This is now a nice, beginning statement. It's interpretive statement for a paragraph. Interpretive is different than factual. A factual statement might be, Julian gets on the bus with his mother. That's factual. We all agree and say, yes, that certainly happened. We read the story. Yep, happened. You don't need to give me an example. You don't need to support it. We all know he got on the bus. Julian resents his mother hates her and wants to hurt her by using other people against her. We're going better now. Julian is racist. That's purely interpretive. We can't point to any one place in the story and say, aha, see, we all look at that and agree on the same thing. That's interpretive. You would need to say, well, show me an example of racism. Show me an example of why what he's doing is harmful. Explain it to me. Prove it to me. That's what we mean by interpretive rather than factual. All right. So as you can see now, we've gone through all 4 of our very fun sentences. Notice that pretty much all of them I've broken down to one sentence because in a lot of cases they were fragmented. They really should have been one sentence. And in several others, there were just so much repetition and just so much looping around to the same idea. They really didn't need to be more than one sentence. So these are all now appropriate, responses and corrections for our first in the wild. If you make these adjustments that I show here, send them in to me. Congratulations, you'll get a 100, on anything that might be left from your original quiz. All right, so that is the end of our first in the wild lecture correction. I hope this is helpful to you. Keep these grammar elements in mind, going forward. Some of this might be helpful to you. Some of this might apply to things that you yourself struggle with. And so remember, we will have many, many more of these quizzes. All right. Thank you so much for viewing this video. And I hope that is helpful. And I look forward to giving a lot of people 100s on your In the Wild Learning Revision quiz. All right. Bye.